What's up, everybody? CHM Carnivores here. I hope you're having a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Now, it's been exactly 1 year since we created that first Nepenthes Seedling video, and I want to show you today what progress over a year looks like for these plants. Now, there is a video that I showed about 6 months ago on their update and their progress, but you will not believe how these plants look 1 year into their growth. So let's get right into it. See you in a minute. All right, everybody, so I want to start with the smallest first and then work my way up. Now, believe it or not, this is 1 year's worth of growth. Now, just like with any other plant, Nepenthes seedlings, all seeds are not created equal. Some species, some hybrids will take longer to grow than others, and sometimes some siblings will take longer than others. I have truncatas that some are 12 inches to 14 inches around that are siblings, with some that are only about 2 inches around. So it all depends on the depends on the environment. It also depends on the plant itself. And so I was going to take this out, but I want to leave it in there. See this one right here? Not all seedlings are going to survive. This got a little too dry, and as a result, I lost some. But there are still some that are growing. Now, they got itty bitty pitchers. I would not feed these at this time. They're going to catch any of the fungus gnats or anything like that, so they should be good to go with that. The biggest thing with these is you just want to make sure that they stay moist enough, and as you can see, if they don't, they will dry out incredibly fast. So definitely watch that. I had this hidden away on some of my truncatas, and so it did not get the care that I wanted it to get, and unfortunately we lost some, but we still have some going. So let's look at the next batch. So here is the next batch. Now, while I don't have the names of them, all of them in these individual batches are siblings. And so this is a perfect example of what I was talking about. You'll see here that we have some that are very, very tiny. That is probably the size of a dime. And then we have others here that are probably the size of a silver dollar. And so they have done very well. I've got, out of some of these didn't have a lot of viability with the seeds. I'll tell you about that after I show off the plants. But still, with that, I've got, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plants growing here. We've got one on the side here that I'll probably stand upright. But yep, they're doing just great. At this point, I could very much feed this one just the tiniest bit of food, but honestly, they don't really need it. They'll still catch those fungus gnats and will do just fine. Feeding them, of course, will have them grow faster. You just have to be careful. If you are going to foliar feed them or give them any food at this size, it will be very, very easy to kill them. So you need to be very careful. If you are at all worried about it, I would just let nature take its course and they will get their own food. All right, everybody, so here is the next batch that is growing, and as you can see, these are starting to get some of those details that you want to see. Again, these are siblings. I don't have the tag for them, but you see the reds coming out, and then look at the flared little wings on them there. Absolutely precious. Looks like I've got 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 in there, but they're all clustered together. Now, you could separate these at this point if you wanted to. I'm not. I'm going to let them go ahead and just continue to grow. But this size is a good size where you can separate them. You just have to be extremely, extremely careful. Nepenthes have very, very fragile roots as it is. At this size, they are incredibly fragile. So take your time and make sure you separate them very genteelly, if you will. But overall, these have done very well, and these were all sown the exact same day, and so within minutes apart. So you can tell, depending on the hybrid, and then also just depending on the vigor of whatever you're growing, there can be a huge difference in how they are doing. So here is the final batch that we will show today, and as you can see, they have done very well. These are going to be quite a bit longer, probably some Bachiana in there, but it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 plants in there. There could be some under the sphagnum moss, and this brings up a good point. You can start to remove the sphagnum moss. I have not yet, because they are not covering the crowns of the plant. Looks like maybe this one is that I'll need to remove, but for the most part, they are doing just fine. This helps keep them moist and keeps their moisture even, and so they have done very well. And if you've seen my sphagnum moss video, all of this moss was dead, supposedly, and I have not put any live sphagnum moss in there. This is all from sphagnum moss that I bought from Lowe's, believe it or not, the orchid moss, and put it in there, and it is growing like crazy. So they have done very, very well. Now that we've looked at all the plants, let's talk about the conditions that I have them in. Sorry if I'm a little bit sweaty. It is hot in this grow tent. It is probably easily 95 degrees outside, and this tent is, I don't know where my humidistat is, but it's probably in the 80s at least. But anyways, let's talk about the environment I have these plants in. Well, you've heard the humidity, it's about 80%. Now, it's important when you're growing your plants that you want to harden them off. If you keep them under dome too long, then they are going to run the risk of going into shock. I started hardening them off when they got about a dime size for the most part. Some, as you can see, were smaller. And I started hardening them off timeline-wise about 3 months. Now, you can do a little earlier than that. I would say probably stick to the later side of that, but it is important to harden them off so that way they can get a chance to get used to the natural environment. And what I recommend is you can buy these little tiny seedling trays on Amazon that have a little circle on the top with perforations, and you can slowly start to open those circles, and that helps to slowly acclimate them to the environment that you want. And so that's exactly what I did, and I had a lot of success. Now, you saw about, I think it was the second tray, that I did lose some, and that's just going to happen, and you're going to have to understand that you will lose these plants along the way, but a really good reputable grower will give you a good supply to start with, and even a single pod can have a ton of seeds in it. So I digress. As far as care and the environment that I have it in, I keep it in the same lighting as I would my grown-up plants, and I have 4 Physeter lights that sit about 4 feet away from the plants. It's about, on the low end, 70 degrees humidity, or degrees, 70% humidity. On the high end, it gets around 85% humidity, but for the most part, it stays within the 70 to 75 range. As far as watering, just like your adult plants, you want to make sure that the soil or the media stays moist at all times. It is very easy, especially if you're growing in these trays, to let the media get too wet. And so you want to make sure that you keep an eye on that, because once they start to rot, they will go extremely fast at that size, and you won't have a lot of time. But that goes for the dry out too. It does not take long for them to dry out. So make sure that you keep them in an area where there's a lot of ambient humidity around larger plants. That has worked for me. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. That has worked for me, and that has been a huge success factor in their longevity and their growth over this prior year. So I'm going to make a dedicated video on buying seeds. That's going to be the next video. And if you've made it this far, I want to give you a little helpful hint. It is very, very important that you know where you're buying your seeds from, for a couple reasons. One is you want to make sure that the plants are not poached. That's one of the biggest things, is you do not want to buy from a reputable site that is selling poached seed pods. The second thing is you want to make sure that you're getting what you're going to get. Time and time again, unfortunately, I see new growers who have been tricked in that they don't know what the seed looks like, and so they buy the seeds thinking they're going to get a carnivorous plant, and it ends up being something totally different. Now, I'm going to talk about more of that in my next video, and also where you can buy them. But as a sneak peek, when it comes to Nepenthes Seedlings, a great place is Carnivorous. Carnivorous has some really cool hybrids. Some of them can be very pricey, but others are very reasonable in price. But you can also use plant forums, and then also you can use Facebook has a lot of groups that are very reputable where you can get these plants. Be careful with eBay and be careful with Etsy. Not saying they're not reputable growers on there, but really, really do your homework. I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you've enjoyed the update on these plants, and maybe I've provided you some insight on what you can expect after a year of growing these plants. Now, the caveats are this: I did not feed these plants. If you do decide to feed them, go with caution, but they can grow faster if you are feeding them, obviously. And so I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't yet, check out the first video and then the 6-month update video, and you can see the whole story coming to life. And I'll be making more of these videos as they grow, and you will have the opportunity to see them from seeds all the way to hopefully larger plants as the future goes on. So, as always, have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.